And so what happens when you engage in regular mammography, going every 2 years and then every year, depending upon which set of guidelines you're following, is the more mammograms you have, the more likely you are to have either a false positive, which is more mammograms than even biopsies, or be treated for something that you'd be better off not knowing about. I mean, in DCIS, 88% of the time it never progresses.
Mm.
And there's a lot you can do to make sure you don't even get DCIS. We'll get to that in a second. So the data show that for every woman who is saved by a mammogram, someplace between 3 and 10 women, depending on what study you look at, are going to be hurt by it. In other words, they're going to have surgery, they're going to have radiation, they're going to take aromatase inhibitors. Well, if you don't have cancer, that's a lot of intervention.
Right.
All right? And then I'll tell you the worst part about this that really upsets me is that these women who all would be alive 5 years later end up in the survivor category, which makes the cancer industry look like it's doing a whole lot better. And if you take a bunch of people who don't have cancer and treat them as if they do, and tell everybody they're survivors, it looks like you're succeeding. Now, if you really don't want to get breast cancer, and I don't know any woman who would want this,
Right.
You get away from the mammography after you look at the studies, not just because I said so, but you get away from the mammography, which gives people a false sense of security. Oh, I have my mammogram. They said I'm fine. I can go home and eat cheese, all right? And you really start to focus on what really reduces your risk. Eat a low-fat, whole foods, plant-based diet, high in fiber, get rid of the dairy, which contains estrogen and estrogen metabolites, and most breast cancers are estrogen receptor positive, so you don't want to be eating estrogen in your food.
Right.
And growth promoters, that sort of thing. And exercise, stay lean. Those are your best protections against breast cancer. And you can't reduce the risk entirely, but you look around the world and you don't see as much breast cancer in Okinawa, for example, as you see in North America.
Right, right. Well, I want to stay on this topic because a lot of women stay away from soy, like food, soy products for fear of phytoestrogens. Now, I know 2 women in my close circle, one that had breast cancer and one that had, what they called precancerous cells. I think you just
yes.
In the breast tissue. Now, their doctors didn't mention anything about staying away from dairy and other animal products, but they sure are afraid of soy. And when they were even told to stay away from it. What are your thoughts on soy products such as edamame, soy milk, tofu, tempeh, the more whole foods and the ones that are closer to whole foods?
Yeah, well, they're more protective than not protective, and we have a great deal of evidence. First of all, I don't believe in magical foods, so I tell people, listen, eating soy doesn't confer some special benefit on people. It's the dietary pattern that you want to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, where we do really see some interesting studies is in adolescent girls. We have some really good data on adolescent girls, and in a dose-dependent manner, girls who eat whole soy products during their adolescent years have a significant reduction in the risk of breast cancer. But we really don't see studies that show that consuming soy increases the risk. So what I tell women who are asking about this, if you like soy foods, you should eat them. You could have tofu in your stir fry. You can have edamame. You can put soy milk on your cereal. If you don't like soy foods, this isn't a soy promotion diet.
Right.
You could grow old and live to be 105 and never touch soy food as long as you live.
Right.
What does aggravate me, and you mentioned this, is the fact that medical doctors will tell women don't eat soy, and they don't say anything about the extra weight that they carry because fat cells produce hormones. They are converted to estrogen in the bloodstream. They don't say anything about the dairy products. They don't say anything about the high fat intake, nothing about the low fiber diet, nothing about exercise. They don't say anything about that. And so these women are misled. We talk about honesty in medicine. They're misled into thinking that everything else can stay the same. I stay away from edamame and I'm going to somehow have a benefit, and that's not going to happen at all.
I totally agree. I mean, I hear it all the time, and it blows me away while they're eating, pasta with cheese all over it.
Yeah.
Can women expect any changes in their menstrual cycle or symptoms of their menstrual period by going plant-based?
Absolutely. Neil Barnard at Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine has done some wonderful studies on women and menstrual cycles and menopause and this sort of thing. When you eat a very high fiber, low fat plant-based diet like the one that you and I eat, what happens is you lose weight, first of all, and that lowers estrogen levels. You stop eating estrogen, and that lowers estrogen levels. And then the high fiber means that you eliminate and you get rid of estrogen metabolites that are going out in the feces. And when that happens, you see a lot of changes, one of which is reduction in menstrual bleeding, reduction or elimination of PMS. Infertility sometimes resolves. We've had a lot of cases of that
Hold on, I'm
here.
sorry to interrupt you. Did you just say reduction or elimination of PMS?
Yeah.
Okay, if that doesn't get you to make a change, I mean, really?
Yeah, well, and I tell women all the time, the average woman is, will have a few hundred menstrual periods in her lifetime. Do you
Right.
think God really intended for us to be miserable 700 times? I mean, come on.
Yeah, yeah.
To be something that takes up a lot of your time. And another interesting thing that will happen is that often the menstrual cycle lengthens so that it turns into like 33 to 35 days instead of 28. So you actually have one fewer menstrual period a year.
Hmm.
And most women like that too.
Right.
So a lot of misery goes away. And along with it, conditions like endometriosis tend to clear up and that sort of thing. So a lot of things get better.
Yeah, apparently. Can you talk about plant-based pregnancy and what expecting women need to know? Because I get questions every once in a while because I have two plant-based children and my wife, my whole family is plant-based. And they weren't plant-based when they were born. Mm-hmm. And my wife didn't go through a plant-based pregnancy. So my youngest son when he was 2 and my oldest son when he was 5, they both switched to a plant-based diet. So they had their before and after. But what do you tell women that are pregnant and expecting and what they can anticipate, what they can do, and also during infancy?
Well, I think the first thing is that we've got to stop thinking of pregnancy as a disease. I mean, I have a good friend during her last pregnancy, they want to do all this intervention. She said, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm pregnant, not sick. Okay. So that's the first thing. This is, our bodies are specifically designed and engineered to carry and deliver children. This is not a disease. Eat well, exercise. And you don't need to take supplements in most cases. The diet will provide everything that you need. I mean, people think you got to take folic acid. Your folate needs can be made with a dozen spears of asparagus. I mean, this is not hard to do every day, right? And if you eat right and exercise, several things will happen. One of the things is that you don't have as much weight gain. I mean, I've seen women who gain 50 pounds when they're pregnant. In Japan, they gain about 12, right? The babies don't grow so big you can't deliver them vaginally. And vaginal delivery is very important for the health of the baby because that's how the baby acquires a microbiome. That's the biggest way in which the baby acquires a microbiome. So you don't grow a baby so big you can't deliver it. The third thing is the babies have a taste for foods. I mean, we have some good research showing that moms who eat a wide variety of foods that are plant-based during pregnancy, the babies are easy to start feeding solid foods when it's time. They're not colicky, they don't fuss, particularly moms who are vegan or eat a plant-based diet when they're breastfeeding. And the other thing is that you've never been through this, but women who have know what I'm talking about. Carrying a baby, delivering a baby, and then taking a home and caring for the baby after delivery. This is an Olympic event, all right? They require a lot of attention. And so women in good health have no trouble doing this. I mean, I'll tell you a couple of stories from our yoga studio. We have a hot yoga studio here. And in one situation, a plant-based pregnant lady came to class at 9:30 in the morning on a Friday, gave birth at 4:30 in the afternoon, 9 months pregnant in a hot yoga class for 90 minutes, gave birth at 4:30 in the afternoon, and 10 days later was back in yoga again. And expressing milk, handing the child off to dad so that she can go to yoga. I'll be home in an hour and a half.
Wow.
And so another one, we had an attorney who was coming to yoga on Saturday morning, went out to get in the car, her water broke in the driveway, she went back in and got her husband, said I was going to go to yoga, but I think we better go, baby's coming now. And then he's back 2 weeks later. And so you get these uber moms who delivery is not difficult, they vaginally deliver, they feel great, they go home in their pre-pregnancy jeans or they're in them in a couple, 3 weeks after, they're back to physical exercise. And so the demands of running around after a little baby that just very unhealthy women,
right.
These women are, they don't have these kinds of problems. So it's often the difference between motherhood being fun and exciting and all that kind of stuff versus, oh my gosh, how am I going to live through this? Because we're 5 days into this. How long does this last? 18 years, So,
I'm so happy you mentioned all these things because I was always wondering why there was so much suffering that's involved in childbearing.
Yeah.
I mean, so much. I mean, when my wife was in the hospital giving birth, I mean, she was suffering, but there were other women in other rooms screaming
Mhm.
for someone to save their lives, they felt like they were dying. I mean,
Yeah. Well,
it,
and then it gets worse later on because the babies are colicky when you formula feed them, or if the mom's eating a bad diet during
right.
breastfeeding, and just the energy. These women just don't have the energy, and so we love. Not only is it fun to be a plant-based pregnant lady, it's fun to be a plant-based mom of a newborn, and they bring them in here. You know, if we had a mom visiting right now to pick up some stuff in our store with a newborn, you wouldn't hear crying and screaming out there. I mean, they cry when they're wet, they cry when they're hungry, but they don't cry all day long because they're uncomfortable. They've got gas and they've got rashes and all that kind of stuff that you see so often in newborns.
Yeah. So what I hear is that when a baby is born, their vitamin B12 levels are virtually zero. Is that true? I mean,
But
is
this
it
isn't a
important?
disease, and their vitamin K levels are low too, so they don't bleed to death during delivery.
Okay.
And so the not only do doctors want to do interventions of all types during pregnancy, and another one of our folks told a doctor one day in very stern terms, and it's sort of like the "I'm not sick, I'm pregnant." She said, we don't need to do all this. My body was specifically designed and engineered to perform this task, and it will do so without your intervention. Thank you very much.
Right.
So, and then they start the business of your baby needs vitamin D. Really? How did humans survive so you and I could have this conversation during all those millions of years where there were no vitamin D pills?
Right.
If a baby's, they say your breast milk won't have vitamin D. No, it won't, because vitamin D is not supposed to be consumed in breast milk or food. You go out in the sun. People say, oh, you can't take a baby out in the sun. Well, I'm not talking about putting the kid on the patio and coming inside for 4 hours. I'm talking about take the baby out in the sun as soon as you possibly can. That's what, so we do so many unhealthy things with these little people. And we treat infancy as a disease that requires intervention.
Yeah, I hear that. What is your take then on vitamin B12?
I think if you're going to eat a vegan diet with no fortified foods, you should take it. But I'll tell you something that surprises people is the B12 deficiencies are much more common in meat eaters, the carnivores, than vegans. The reason is that the carnivores end up with more gastrointestinal disorders. So B12 and autoimmune diseases both. And so B12 requires intrinsic factor, which is produced by the parietal cells in the gut, in order for the B12 to be usable, absorbable, and usable by the system. And so people who have these GI disorders, which are rampant in carnivores, as you know,
Yep.
are much more likely to have a B12 deficiency than somebody who eats like you or I do.
Okay. Good point. Okay, so what are your take-homes, your bullet points for women that are wanting to go on a plant-based diet yet are fearful?
Well, first of all, what you should be fearful about is not doing it. And I'll tell you why. I'm 61 years old, right? And I'm at an age where a lot of my peers are taking medications. They're overweight or obese. They visit a lot of doctors. They've had procedures and body parts taken out, hysterectomies, and
Right.
gallbladders removed, and all this sort of thing. And I really don't require it. The last time I made a claim on my health insurance was 1994. And it was because I got bit by my own cat when he got outside, and I had an infection. The cat bites are really highly,
Nasty.
really, yeah. I had to take an antibiotic for a week, and that's the only medical intervention I've had of any type since, whenever. So the key to freedom, at my age, I'm planning to live for another 40 years. I have a lot of work to do, maybe longer if I can. But at my age, what I think people are looking for is you don't want to end up disabled. You don't want to end up in a nursing home. You want to live until you die.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be active, mentally present, and cognitively sharp. The ticket to that, you got to take care of yourself. And I've said this to many people, women have a tendency to put everybody else first. And they often blur the line between being unselfish and selfless. Those are two different things, all right? Selflessness is when you take care of everybody but yourself for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And in the process of doing this, you commit often the most selfish act of all, which is you get sick, and then you become the burden on all the people you were trying not to impose on at all. All the soccer games you went to instead of the gym because you couldn't be 15 minutes late and that sort of thing. It catches up with you. So the key to a healthy, long, happy, vibrant, do what you want to life is doing this. The fear is not in doing it. The fear is in not doing what's going to happen to you if you don't eat well and take care of yourself.
Wow, huge. Did y'all hear that? And this is resonating big time. Talk about your book, Food Over Medicine.
Yeah, so Food Over Medicine is done in an interview style. I had a great co-author. Glenn Mercer is a marvelous author, and it was his idea to do it interview style. And people love that because it's easy
Totally.
to understand and that sort of thing. It's been made into an audiobook. And then the food, I don't know if you saw Food Choices. The book for Food Choices is being sent out a chapter at a time. You can sign up if you want to get a chapter at a time, and then at the end we'll publish it. And I'm writing The Yo-Yo Effect, a book or a movie on dieting that's coming out in June. So I'm writing a book on that one right now.
Sweet, sweet. So where's the best place for people to get to find you, find your book and your services?
Go to wellnessfarmhealth.com. My email address is pampopper@msn.com. I answer all my own emails, so feel free to email me with anything, questions you have, whatever.
Yeah, you're very accessible. I'm going to have that all linked down in the description for easy access for people. Dr. Pam Popper, thank you so much for being here. You and your work are truly appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure.